Dividing complex numbers is just a little bit different. We talked about the conjugate already. So the conjugate is what we're going to use. Because we are never allowed to divide by a radical. Really, what this means is 10 divided by 2 times the square root of negative 1. That's what this really means, right? That's what the I means. And you don't need to write this down. When you have a negative or a radical underneath the square root, in the bottom of the fraction, in the denominator of the fraction, you're going to have problems, okay? So we have to get rid of this I because you're never going to be allowed to work the problem out if you have a radical or a square root in the denominator, okay? So what does this look like if we have to get rid of the I? It says, watch out, I can't be in the denominator. So we just said that. If the denominator is a monomial, what does monomial mean? One term. Then multiply the top and bottom by I. If the denominator is a binomial, 2 terms, we're going to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. So this seems really complicated, but it's not. If it's a monomial, all we're going to do is multiply this fraction by I over I. Does anyone know why we're allowed to do that? So it's going to cancel. That's the purpose. But why are we allowed to just choose something to multiply by it? What is anything divided by itself? 1. And if you multiply something by 1, are you changing its value?
No.
You're just changing the way that it looks. So we are allowed to multiply by I over I because this is really just the number 1, right? Anything divided by itself is just 1. So we're not changing the value of our problem, we're just changing the way that it looks. So now to multiply fractions, you multiply straight across. So 10 times I is going to give me 10I. What's 2I times I? Mitchell? 2I squared. We still have an I in the bottom. But what do we know? How are we going to be able to fix this, Ashley? What? I squared is really negative 1, right? This is really negative 1. So this is really 10I divided by negative 2, right? Because 2 times negative 1 gives me negative 2. Can I simplify 10 over negative 2? Can you reduce 10 over negative 2? Yeah. You can?
5 over 1.
Okay, 5 over 1. But do we have to write the 1 on the bottom? Nope. So this is really negative 5I. Ask a specific question. Don't just say how. What part of the problem are you struggling with?
I thought we were supposed to get rid of the I's.
In the denominator. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Yep, I in the denominator. There is no more denominator, right? So now we're good. Okay?
I thought we were supposed to get rid of the I.
In the denominator.
The top, isn't it?
And that's okay to have it in the numerator. Okay, so on number 14, why don't you do this one with me? What page are we in? Page 17. Okay, on 14, we have a monomial on the bottom, so I just need to multiply by what 2 things?
I.
I'm right here on this one. Okay. By just I. Because I don't care about the negatives right now. Those are going to work itself out. I just care about I being there. So I'm multiplying by I over I. 4 times I is just, 4I. And then negative 9I times I. Negative 9I squared.
Doesn't that turn into positive 9?
Okay, so I squared is negative 1. And negative 9 times negative 1. Positive 9. So I have 4I over 9. Do you think, can we reduce that at all? But do we have I in the denominator anymore?
No.
So we're good. Okay, let's look at 15. Now in the top, I have a binomial, but in the denominator, I only have a monomial. So I still am just multiplying by I, top and bottom. What am I going to have to do on the top, though?
Multiply both terms.
What's that called when you're giving it to both? Say that again, Ashley. Distributing, right? You're going to have to distribute the I to both terms. So I get 28I and negative 8I times I, negative 8I squared, divided by 4I squared. We have a little bit of work to do. So I know that this I squared is going to turn into negative 1, which makes that negative 8 become what? Positive 8, good. And in the bottom, that I squared becomes negative 1, which makes the denominator become what? Negative 4. Now, so I had 28I plus 8 divided by negative 4. Alyssa?
Why don't you move the I over with the 8?
That's not what we do.
Okay, that's not helpful. What do you mean? Move which I over?
It says negative 8I2.
I squared, right?
Yeah.
And I squared and I are different, right? So we can't combine like terms. Because those are not like terms, right? I and I squared, they have to be the same exponent to combine them. So that I squared with the 8, this one right here, becomes negative 1. And then I multiply negative 1 times negative 8 to get positive 8.
Okay.
Okay? All right, is there anything else I can do to reduce this one?
Your 8 and 4.
Can I reduce 4 into both 28 and 8? Okay, so let's do that. What's 28I divided by negative 4? Negative 7I. And then what's 8 divided by negative 4? Negative 2.
And then you put that over 4, right?
Nope, because the 4 is gone. We divided by it, right? We canceled it out. Okay, let's go on to 17. Let's go on and do number 17.
Now, when will we do the opposite of the...
Okay, so 17, right, is a binomial. That's what it says. It's a binomial. Is it 2 terms on the bottom or 1 term? How many of them?
Okay,
Right?
2 terms.
That's a binomial. Okay. So when it's 2 terms, that's when we're going to multiply by the conjugate. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. What's the conjugate of 5 minus I?
5 plus I.
Thank you, Crystal. 5 plus I. So I'm going to multiply by 5 plus I on the bottom and 5 plus I on the top. Why am I allowed to do that?
Equals 1.
Because 5 plus I over 5 plus I is just the number 1, right? So now we have a little bit of distributing. So on the top, we're going to take this a step at a time. Gives me negative 10. Negative 2 times I, negative 2I. So that's on the top. Everyone okay with the numerator? Now we've already practiced multiplying out the denominator up there at the top before we went on break. So what is the trick?
They cancel, don't they?
What cancels? Don't just say they cancel.
5 plus 1 cancels out.
Okay. So what happens really when we're multiplying by the conjugate, if I have 25 minus 5I plus 5I minus I squared, what happens here?
They cancel out.
They cancel out, right? So really, if I wanted to take a shortcut, I'm just multiplying the first one times the first one,
And just push the I's.
and then the I times the I. Because I know that if I'm multiplying by the conjugate, I know that the middle terms are going to drop out. Minus I squared. You can go ahead and do this thing if you want to, but the middle terms are always going to cancel out. Again, it must be the conjugate to be able to take that shortcut. They must be opposite signs.
Okay, and then the minus I squared will be just minus 1, right?
Okay, I squared becomes -1, but you still have a negative there.
the
So what'd you
positive
say,
one.
Ryan? It becomes +1. So I have -10 minus 2i over 26, because I did 25 plus 1. Can I reduce anything?
Yeah?
I believe so, yes.
Can I divide the same number out of all 3 of those?
No.
You can divide 2 out of all of them.
Aren't they all even, Taylor?
Yeah, but it's 26 though.
Right, but I'm not saying can you divide 10 and 26. Can you divide a 2 out of everything?
Yes.
Okay, so we're reducing. Okay? So if I want to divide a 2 out of everything, that's going to become 5. That's just I, and that becomes 13. So this would be -5 minus I over 13.
That's the final answer.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to try number 18 on your own, please. 26 divided by 2. I divided each of those terms by 2.
You should try 18?
Yep. You're multiplying by the conjugate. So what's the conjugate of 6 plus 2i? 6 minus 2i on top and bottom. Number 18. Okay, so we have 30i plus 10 over 40. We know that all of those can be divisible by 10. So when I divide by 10, I have 3i plus 1 over 4. Raise your hand if this is the answer that you have. 3i plus 1 over 4. Okay? You have to be able to reduce all of them by 10. And when you do that, you have 3i plus 1 over 4. Does anyone have any questions on how I got here on number 18?
Nope, I just goofed over my signs.
Be careful. Okay. We're going to start. Yeah.
All right, I'm confused.
Okay.
For like 17, 18, how did you figure you multiply it by 5 plus j or I?
Because it's always the opposite sign. That's the definition of the conjugate, is the opposite sign. So it's the exact same thing, you just choose the sign that's different. So like here, 6 plus 2i, so you're going to multiply by 6 minus 2i.
Or you're going to put it on the top also?
Yep, the same thing, because if it's the same thing and on top and bottom, then that number really is just 1. Okay? So let's talk about number 19. What are you going to multiply 19 by?
2 negative
2 minus I and 2 minus I, right? What about number 20? What would you multiply by, Donald? If you're doing 20.
1. 2 plus 4i.
And 2 plus 4i. Always the denominator. This is Donald, by the way. He's joining our class. So, hi, Donald. So this is 2 plus 4i and 2 plus 4i on this one. Okay? And then you just have some more multiplication to do at the top. But I want you to have a chance to do some homework. So let's turn to page 18. You need to get started on 1 through 16. So, yeah, homework 10. Homework 10. Page 18 and 19. We're going to do 1 through 16. Okay? So take a few minutes and go get started. We're going to work on this for about 25 minutes.